It was a moonless night, and the only light on the desolate highway came from the dim glow of Mark's car headlights. He was driving back from a late shift at work, the road stretching endlessly before him. The radio crackled with static, and he turned it off, preferring the silence over the eerie, distorted voices. As Mark rounded a bend, he saw a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb outstretched. Against his better judgment, he slowed down. The figure was a young woman, her clothes tattered and dirty, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like she had been through hell. "Please, can you give me a ride?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mark hesitated but nodded. Unlocking the passenger door, she climbed in, and he noticed her hands were shaking. As they drove, she told him her story. She had been hitchhiking for days, trying to escape an abusive relationship. Her boyfriend had chased her, and she had barely managed to get away. Mark felt a pang of sympathy and assured her she was safe now. But as they continued down the dark road, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He glanced at her, and for a moment, her eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered and died. Mark cursed under his breath and pulled over to the side of the road. The woman looked at him, her expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I don't know," Mark replied, popping the hood and stepping out to check the engine. As he fumbled with the wires, he heard a soft whisper behind him, "He's coming." Mark turned around, but the woman was gone. Panic surged through him as he scanned the darkness, but there was no sign of her. He hurried back to the car, his heart pounding. As he reached for his phone to call for help, he saw a shadowy figure in the rearview mirror. A man stood behind the car, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He grinned, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. Mark tried to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. The man approached, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Desperation took over, and Mark grabbed a wrench from the trunk, ready to defend himself. But as the man reached the car, he simply vanished, leaving only a chilling laugh that echoed through the night. Mark finally managed to get the car started and sped away, his heart racing. He never saw the woman or the man again, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, waiting for their next victim. The next day, Mark couldn't focus at work. His mind kept drifting back to the events of the previous night. He decided to do some research, hoping to find some explanation for what he had experienced. He discovered an old newspaper article about a young woman who had been murdered by her boyfriend on that very stretch of road. Her body was never found, and her boyfriend had disappeared without a trace. Mark realized that the woman he had picked up was the ghost of the murdered hitchhiker, and the man he had seen was her vengeful boyfriend. He shuddered at the thought and vowed never to drive that road again. Years passed, but Mark could never forget that night. He often wondered if the hitchhiker and her boyfriend were still out there, trapped in an endless cycle of fear and vengeance. He warned others to avoid that road, but some didn't listen. Occasionally, he would hear stories of other drivers who had encountered the hitchhiker and her shadowy pursuer. Mark knew that the only way to break the cycle was to find the woman's body and give her a proper burial. He spent years searching, but he never found any trace of her. The road remained a place of darkness and fear, a reminder of the horrors that lurked just beyond the edge of the headlights. In the end, Mark could only hope that one day, someone would find the hitchhiker's body and put her spirit to rest. Until then, the road would remain a haunted place, a testament to the enduring power of fear and vengeance. John was driving through the back roads of a rural town, the kind of place where cell service was non-existent and the nearest gas station was miles away. The night was pitch black, and the only sound was the hum of his car's engine. He had taken a wrong turn and was trying to find his way back to the main road, as John drove, he noticed something strange. No matter how far he went, the scenery never changed. The same twisted trees, the same dilapidated barns, the same rusted road signs. It was as if he was driving in circles, trapped in some kind of nightmarish loop. He checked the clock on the dashboard, but it seemed to be stuck at 3:33 a.m. A sense of dread settled over him as he realized he had been driving for hours with no end in sight. He tried to turn around, but the road seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. Panic set in, and John pressed down on the accelerator, hoping to break free from whatever was holding him captive. But the faster he went, the more distorted the world around him became. The trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The barns seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, their windows glowing with an eerie light. John glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a man, his face obscured by shadows. He raised a hand and pointed directly at John, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. John slammed on the brakes. But the car skidded to a stop on its own. The man approached, his footsteps echoing in the silence. As he drew closer, John could see his face more clearly. It was gaunt and hollow, his eyes sunken and lifeless. "You're not supposed to be here," the man said, his voice a low, guttural growl. I am lost," John stammered, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The man shook his head. "No, you're trapped. This road is a prison, and there's no escape." John felt a cold chill run down his spine as the man reached out and touched the hood of his car. The engine sputtered and died, leaving him in complete darkness. The man stepped back, his eyes never leaving John's. "Drive," he commanded. John turned the key, and the engine roared to life. He pressed down on the accelerator, but the car wouldn't move. The man smiled, a twisted, malevolent grin. "Drive," he repeated. John tried again, but the car remained stationary. The man began to laugh, a sound that echoed through the night like a chorus of the damned. John closed his eyes, praying for this nightmare to end. When he opened them, he was back on the main road, the sun rising in the distance. He glanced at the clock, and it read 6 a.m. He let out a sigh of relief, but the memory of that endless road and the man with the glowing eyes haunted him. John never took that route again, and he warned others to avoid it. You never know what could be lurking in the darkness. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Top Secret if you want more of Night Drive horrors.